Let's talk about Vera Pauw, because you mentioned there with her. You have your podcast, it's season 2 of episode with Richie Sadlier. You spoke to Vera Pauw, which is something no one has managed to do since obviously she left the Irish women's team. She opened up incredibly to you and talked about the turmoil and the tough time she's had since stepping away from the team.
I've been in contact with Vera for several months. She left the FAI last August, and I got to travel to France last week for a day trip to her home and sat down and we did a podcast chat. Yeah, she did. She spoke very openly about what it has been like to have been her at various points over the last, particularly over the last 18 months. And she had a difficult time, and it's been difficult for her since she left the FAI. But I was really waiting until a point where I felt she was ready to speak. We have been in touch over the last few months, and I wouldn't have been comfortable having that conversation before Christmas,
because
for
she's
example.
not in a good place.
She really struggled with a lot. She's spoken about this in the podcast. I'm not breaching confidence here. So but she is now of the view that she's not employable in the Western world, I think was the phrase she used.
And this is in relation to what happened in America and everything. Because when she was managing over there, there have been some accusations by former players of how she treated them, the strict diet and everything, regime she had them on. Yeah,
so there are a lot of people, which obviously I can't comment on the validity or the whatever of what's been said, but there was a lot of people on an anonymous basis made allegations against her for how she treats players, how she approaches her job, and the impact her approaches have on them. And Vera came back very strongly refuting all those allegations and saying they're just not true.
You've been amazing at opening up about your own mental struggles, and it's something that you've done since stepping away from football, and you've offered a platform for people to be free and open to do that. And I think that doing this to Vera Pauw would be cathartic for her, because I know she's in fairly serious counselling at the minute. But it really gave us an insight. And one of the lines that she said about was like, I didn't know how to live anymore. I felt I could do 2 things: go and find help, or I kill myself. And I know she said after that it wasn't a consideration, but it was one of the only 2 options. I mean, that is very scary words to be using for somebody, you know, as a former Irish manager. You know?
And you think of what we assume it must have been like for her last summer, leading a team like us into a World Cup on that stage, and that
first time ever getting to a Women's World Cup.
You assume that the highs of that,
pinnacle,
the professional achievement and the personal experience, all of that, and then for within months to be using a phrase like that to describe how you are just shows the journey she's been on. But I like doing that.
And it shows how important, I suppose, your mental is, and even we talk about it all the time, the mental struggles, and how important it is for people to go and seek help.
It is, yeah. And what I like about that podcast, I just sit down with someone and ask them what it's like to have been them during a particular phase of their life, and it just turns into really open conversation. And like you said, I've been a fan of kind of opening up conversations like that for years now. I work as a psychotherapist, but I primarily from my own experience of, like, when I left the world of football in my mid-20s, I would have used similar phrases than the one you just called out there from Vera. I was in a very difficult place where I was completely lost, no sense of who I was, where I was going, what kind of place there was in the world for me. But the key thing that I remember about that period was I didn't feel like I had the option to open up. Not because my friends weren't there or my family weren't approachable, but I firmly believed, probably because the influences of being a professional footballer for years and living in that kind of very male-dominated macho world, particularly at a club like Millwall, I was led to believe that this is something lads just don't do. If you have a difficulty, shut up and deal with it silently, don't talk openly about it. So any kind of opportunity to push back against that or to challenge those messages, I love getting on board.
I know you're doing a How's the Head campaign with Chadwicks. I also know that you've looked at what they're doing in Swedish changing rooms with young men in Scandinavia about having these chats all the time, trying to introduce that into Ireland as well, to be like, how are you? How's it going? Have you seen an improvement? Like, do you see an improvement in how men are talking to each other? Because you've been working in this area for so long now.
Yes is the answer, because I would, whether it's corporate talks or in schools or my private practice or conversations like this, I'm comfortable to talk about it. And I think when you're comfortable, it kind of spreads among the company and you open up conversations. But there are a lot of people that aren't comfortable. Like you mentioned there, that I've been asked by Chadwick's to get behind a campaign called House the Head, and I was delighted to do so. And it's all about encouraging tradespeople to talk more openly about their mental health. And they commissioned research to look at this area. And the stats really jumped out at me. Like 85% of the people who responded to this said that they believed that colleagues in the trades industry would be reluctant to talk about the mental health. 85%.
Huge, but if you think of it, that's a fairly male-dominated industry, which is very similar to the male dressing room that you would have been a part of, and it takes time to open up and to have a platform like that podcast to try and do that.